We need to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Actually, we need to talk about why that gorilla is 800 pounds. Is it muscle or is it fat? Or actually, you know what? This intro is not working like I'd hoped. The metaphor just isn't happening for me. I'm sorry. This isn't how I was hoping it would go. But we need to talk about fat. And the first thing you need to know is that you probably don't know as much as you think you know. So let's get it straight. I mean, for that matter, I probably don't know as much as I think I do, and that's not very much. It's just that there's not a lot of consensus. Before I say much more, I just want to point out that there's a lot of controversy on the subject of fat. You won't have to look very far at all to find people who say the veritable opposite of the things I'm going to tell you. Really smart people. Really smart people. Medical doctors, associations, collegiate research organizations, people with more initials after their names than a bowl of alphabet soup. Do not take my information as gospel. But I would suggest that you learn what you can and try to listen to people with varying opinions. Don't fall into an echo chamber. Now, that being said, I do have to speak my truth. In fact, I would be remiss and hypocritical not to. But just remember, I am not a physician, and I am not qualified to dispense medical advice. This is a YouTube channel, and I hope to gosh that you do not rely on creators like me for serious medical advice. Okay, great. Now, I haven't been looking forward to this video, frankly, because it is complicated and it is controversial, and that's the problem. People make these simplistic and insipid statements, like really smart people are still talking as if fat is bad. People who should know better. First of all, just let that go. Fat is good for you. You need it. Your brain needs it. Every cell in your body needs fat to do its job properly. To put it simply, cell walls are possibly the most important of every living thing that ever lived, slithered, shivered, walked, talked, flew, grew, went poo, ended up in a stew or both sides of the zoo. Our cell walls are the mechanism by which we absorb nutrients, fight infections, move hither and thither, make new us's, think, drink, and blink, and guess what cell walls need to function? Fat. And not just any fat. They need the right kinds of fat, and the big fat that's where it's at. Okay, less Dr. Seuss, slam poetry, and more information, please. I can hear you thinking. There are at least 3 gajillion different kinds of fat, and foods generally have more than one kind, and the other macros in a food can impact how your body responds to its fats. And when we refer to a food as being a certain type of fat, that means that most of its fat is of that type. You sometimes hear people putting fat into 3 categories: saturated, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the chemistry because I'm not a chemist. I don't want to lose your attention over something that I'm not qualified to teach and you didn't sign up for. And it isn't that important to your daily life anyway. Now, the easiest way I can explain it is like this. And don't be afraid of the chemistry set stuff. This is super easy. Each one of these black balls is a carbon atom. Each carbon atom has 4 connectors on it, 4 places it can connect to something else. Now, since these are all connected to their neighbors, that accounts for 2 of its connectors. So each one of these now has 2 available connectors, 2 open connectors. So if you're a bunch of hydrogen floating around, that's these white balls, then the white balls, the hydrogens are going to come in and connect to those available connectors. And the first thing that you do is you go into fast forward. Okay, so now all of our available connectors have hydrogen atoms on them. That means that this cell is saturated. It's saturated because it can't hold any more hydrogen. But sometimes the carbons will connect to each other with 2 connectors, like this. So these 2 guys are connected with 2 connectors. That's called a double bond. And that means more hydrogen can sneak in. If this hydrogen really wants to, it can push its way in. And then another one can even come in. So when you have a double connector like that, that's unsaturated. It was unsaturated because there was room for more hydrogen. Like that. Oops, this guy shouldn't be here. Unsaturated because there's room for a hydrogen to sneak in. Saturated, because there's no room for any more hydrogens. Now, you might be asking, what about these guys at the end? Too complicated. That depends on what kind of fat it is. And that doesn't happen in real life. Okay, so there you've got a saturated fat molecule. Not really that complicated, is it? If a fat molecule doesn't have room for any more hydrogens, it's saturated. If there's a way for more hydrogen to sneak in, it's unsaturated. Simple. Now, do you need to know this when you're eating or cooking or shopping? Absolutely not. But now you know, and now you know what those things mean. You know the difference between saturated and unsaturated fat, and if you didn't before, you're just that much smarter than you were 5 minutes ago, and you're welcome. To say that any of these three types of fat is inherently good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, it's overly simplistic. I wish there was a simple way to look at it, but there actually isn't, which is a good reason to be suspicious of anyone who says things like saturated fats are all bad. The saturated fats found in grass-raised and finished beef, coconut oil, and some fish can be extremely healthy. Palm oil can also be really healthy, but some of it is produced in really horrific ways, so you should be careful and choosy about where it comes from. Some polyunsaturated fats like soybean oil and cotton oil can be real baddies, but there are others like those found in flax that are really good. Unless you heat them up. And see, I told you this was complicated. But it is important. Not only do your cells need it, but your body stores energy in fat. Your brain is made mostly of fat. Your fat cells send messages to the rest of your body. You need fat. Now, was this to say that all fats are good? No, not at all. There are some you should avoid as much as possible. The really, really bad ones are called trans fats. Avoid them. Some foods have a little bit of naturally occurring trans fats, and that's fine. The scary ones are the human-made trans fats, sometimes called hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated because they've been chemically altered, usually to turn liquid oils into fats that are solid at room temperature. That makes them more shelf-stable, which is very attractive to the consumer packaged food industry, aka junk food. You also hear a lot of talk about omega-3 and omega-6 fats. Bottom line is we need both, and not all are created equal. Think of it this way. Stuff that's been processed to fool your mouth into thinking that it's something else might also be really good at fooling your body too. And that old margarine commercial said it well. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. It's so ironic that the product they were selling was exactly the thing I'm warning you about. Really, you should search YouTube and watch a couple of those old commercials. Probably the most ironic thing that's ever been on a television. There they were selling a product that was like pure trans fats, designed to fool your tongue into thinking it was butter with the tagline that it's not nice to fool Mother Nature. They were using the best possible reason to avoid their product as their tagline. And their tagline was weirdly the best reason to avoid their product, like the poison that it truly was. Oh, the ironing. Anyway, when you trick your body into thinking that a processed fat is the same thing as a naturally occurring fat, then your body might try to use it as if it were the real thing, and that is not good. Imagine if someone tricked you into buying some kind of fake gasoline and you put it in your car. Well, your car would stop running properly and it might even get permanently damaged. So, just eat real food. Healthy saturated fats have specific roles in your body, and faking your body out with imposters like refined and hydrogenated oils can mess things up big time. Now, there are some unrefined, unsaturated fats that are great. Look for expeller-pressed or cold-pressed oil, since it's the heat and chemical additives that can transform harmless things into poison. Flax is good. Hemp is good. Olive oil is incredible. A couple of handfuls of nuts actually reduces all-cause mortality by an impressive amount. Now, you won't have to look very far at all to find people who say the opposite of everything I've been saying here. So, is it complicated? Well, I told you so. It's a bit much to keep in your head when you go to the grocery store, so here are the takeaways. Stop thinking in terms of saturated fat being bad. Instead, look at how it's produced. Look for pasture grass-fed and even better grass-finished beef, coconut oil, and even sustainably produced palm oil. Eat more omega-3s, so look for pasture-raised eggs and butter and beef and fatty fish. I think it's a good idea to be careful with tuna and salmon, which is so sad because, God, they're delicious. Sardines and mackerel are great sources, but they aren't for everybody. Smoked herring, aka kippers, are pretty delicious and affordable and aren't loaded with mercury. Try them, they're good. Stay away from refined oils. Avoid corn oil, avoid soybean oil, so-called vegetable oil, safflower oil, and do not fall for canola oil. It's a trick! Anytime someone tells you that something is unhealthy just because it has fat in it, just smile politely and change the subject. If you haven't already caught on, remember that a lot of the time the real issue is how our food is raised. You are what you eat, and you are also what your food ate. Cattle who eat grass and chickens who eat bugs produce food that produces a better human. Do not eat fake fats. No margarine, no Crisco, none of that stuff. If you can't believe it's not butter, then I can't believe it's food. Ultra-processed anything is ultra gross. And yes, that will be the topic of an upcoming video. And there's a lot more to say about that. And there's a lot more to say about fat too. But for now, it's time to wrap up this video. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you next time. Ciao.